My name is Cody, and I'm going to be sharing my reflections of my first 6 months as a software engineer. So just a little bit about me before I get into the meat of the presentation. So before I became a software engineer, I was this. I was a sensory scientist. What is a sensory scientist? A sensory scientist is someone that helps product developers understand how people perceive and or like their products. So specifically, I work within the food industry, helping to optimize products before they were launched, or if there's maybe a process change, helping those process engineers, those product developers, to get feedback essentially on the changes that they're making and whether or not they're good or bad. That's kind of a simplified version of it, but as a sensory scientist, I did a lot of statistical analyses and reporting, and I learned to use R and to do some automating of my analyses, and eventually got it up to a point where I was creating web applications for not only myself, but for some of my colleagues as well. And so developing those web applications was just a lot of fun. I found it to be very interesting, very fascinating. So I actually took a little bit of time off work to focus on pivoting into software engineering. And that led me to become this. So now I am a software engineer for a potato brokerage company within Lancaster County. And the potato brokerage actually, they have a software that they use in-house, and they have another company, which is their technology company, that manages and maintains that software. But then we also have applications that work with land-grant institutions for agricultural data management solutions. So it's kind of specifically tailored to the ag industry and helping researchers within commodity groups to effectively kind of centralize their data so that growers, for the potato chip industry specifically, for plants and for the breeders to all kind of come together on the data that the breeders are essentially generating for their variety development, to have a kind of central location for that data to make better decisions on these varieties that they're making. So a little bit about me outside of work. I tinker around with Vim now and then. I use NeoVim, so it's not true Vim. It's the kind of more up to date one. And I like to stay active, so I like to work. I like to strength train. Zone 2 conditioning is something that I like to do. So it's just kind of like jogging. Essentially, but you're watching your heart rate while you're doing it and staying within the zone. And as a former food science sensory scientist, I also like to make food products. So this is some wine that I made recently, and that's a failed attempt at making a natural mozzarella cheese. It was still cheese, it was just kind of, it didn't really get to the final point that I was looking for, that nice mozzarella. So that's a little bit about me. A couple other things before I get into my reflections. I just want to say thank you to the organizers of CPOS and to everyone for being here, obviously coming to my talk, that's really nice, but also contributing to CPOS. By being here, you're contributing to this local tech community that we have here in Lancaster County and central Pennsylvania. And I can say I wouldn't be here talking, let alone have a job, if it wasn't for this Lancaster tech community. So thank you to CPOS organizers, volunteers, everyone that's here, also the individuals that organize the local tech meetups for Tech Lancaster, Open Coffee. Again, I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for this community. So thank you very much. Next, I'd like to apologize. So I do have generative AI in this talk. I don't know what your feelings are about all that kind of stuff, but I don't have the fancy ChatGPT premium subscription. I just don't have it in the budget right now, so I had to use a free service. So if any of these images are disturbing or scare you, I would say to walk out. If you could stick around, that'd be great. So sorry in advance. And lastly, as a warning, I just want to say take what I say with a grain of salt. Obviously, I'm very new to this industry, but also these are my reflections for my specific kind of environment that I'm kind of in, and for my specific circumstances. So I'm not intending for this to be an advice kind of talk, to give advice to other people. It's more of just sharing my learnings. If something resonates with you, great, but otherwise just hold it lightly. And now getting into my learnings. So I'm going to talk about tools for a decent portion of this talk, and I'm going to start at the beginning, specifically my first week. So in order to be able to balance a chainsaw on just one leg, you first need to be able to stand. And in order to be able to stand, it's very helpful to have other people who can also stand around you to help you while you're getting on that one leg. For my specific situation, my first week, the developers that I was working with, the senior devs, they essentially dedicated the first 3 days to making sure that I had all the tools that I needed, all the API keys, and essentially had our web applications up and running on my local system so that I could start contributing right away. And that was just super helpful. I bring that up because I've been in jobs in the past where the onboarding was more of an HR thing, and it was kind of just, here are some documents, here are your benefits, all right, go talk to your manager and do that kind of stuff. So this was very active, very involved, and I just really appreciated being able to be brought up to speed and have all that attention and that kind of upfront, getting minimally viably productive. So that was very helpful for receiving that from the senior devs. So tools are tools. This is something that my brother, who is a software engineer, would tell me as I was kind of starting to get into software engineering and starting to figure out how am I going to learn and make this pivot. I think I didn't really have as much of an appreciation for it before my job, but now that I've been in a job and been contributing to a team of developers, I do understand that we don't want to be a slave to our tools. If we put too much emphasis on optimizing our tools, we can potentially have them weigh us down and maybe make ourselves look like a fool. So essentially, kind of what I've been learning is that we want to be able to pick up our tools very easily, carry them lightly, and be able to swap them in and out as needed. The main reason we're using tools is to get stuff done. One thing that I focused on as I started my job, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't chasing down the latest and the greatest. I didn't want to be the most productive developer. I just wanted to get started. And as I said earlier, be minimally viably productive. I needed to get up and running. And that was made it very easy with the things that I said that the senior devs helped me out with getting set up and everything with my dev environment. But I think tech is an interesting space because there's always something new and there's always something that you could be chasing. But I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just chasing too many things all at once. So I needed to get up to date with just the tools that my team uses so that I could actually contribute to projects. So I tried to avoid those chainsaw procs. They look like they sound like they could be pretty nice for helping you cut down, additional tree or two, or the double bladed chainsaw would double your productivity. But I tried to stay away and just kind of filter out new things because these things could potentially do more harm than good if you kind of figure that way. Now, the Giga chainsaw, that might be something to come back to later on, but I ought to know how to use a regular chainsaw before I get to that point. before I started my job, I used VS Code, and I got pretty familiar with VS Code. VS Code is very convenient, has pretty much does everything for you. When I started my job, like I said, I wanted to make sure that I was focusing on the things that I needed to start getting things done. So during my journey, I was exposed to Vim. I was influenced successfully by YouTubers and other people online. And so I had several false starts with Vim. And sometimes Vim actually got in the way of just learning those fundamentals of engineering, software engineering, web development that I was mainly focusing on just to get my first job. However, after 3 months of being on the job, I felt comfortable enough to actually start getting a bit more intimate with my tools and trying to really understand and leverage them a little bit better each time that I use them. So specifically, I made sure that I was familiar with the things that I was using. Like Postman was new for me, Ray, Tinkerwell, just some things for interacting with databases and that kind of stuff. I felt like I was being able to contribute. One thing that I really like about kind of terminal enthusiasts and people that use Vim, not only does it look pretty cool, the stuff that they do, they're slapping their keyboard and moving around real quick, but I appreciate the kind of culture of trying to understand your tools at a more deeper level to try to leverage them more. I did start incorporating Vim, and I do use Vim now, NeoVim, and every time that I use it, I try to learn just a single thing more. So that way, I'm keeping it at a manageable pace. I am getting a bit more productive every time I open it up, but I'm also not just trying to understand everything all at once. There's so many packages and stuff out there that you can use. Sometimes the one guy that I work with will ask me questions about, well, what do I have in my config, and I'm just like, I have no idea. It works. Yeah. So one day I might not understand everything that's in there, but I'm just trying to keep it slow at this point. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to feedback, and this is something that I'm actually trying to get better and better at, and that's something that I've been learning a bit more recently. So, seeking feedback specifically and seeking feedback early and often. So I find myself with some projects getting really into the project and kind of siloing myself, and just like I complete a task and then I notice something was off with another aspect of it, and I go and then I actually fix that thing, but then I find another thing, and then I find another thing. And then it kind of like builds, days become weeks, weeks become months, and then I would go to share my project with the other developers on my team, and then things just kind of start falling apart. Some assumptions that I had, or an assumption that I had, didn't necessarily align with their perspectives and their understandings of what we were trying to do. So trying to get feedback earlier, doing smaller changes and getting feedback earlier is something that I'm trying to do more often to prevent that buildup of all that potential wasted time and effort. So that's kind of from like a perfectionist kind of standpoint, trying to get out of that perfectionist mode, but also we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes having someone else beside you and taking a look at what you're working on can give you that new perspective and help you become aware of the things that you don't know. And that's another thing that I've been learning with getting feedback. I'm very fortunate because the other developers on my team actually model this behavior. They ask me and the other teammates questions all the time, and that leads me to my next slide about contributing feedback. So because I do work on a team where people are constantly kind of asking for feedback about things, I've felt like this little kitty at a couple times, especially at the very beginning when it kind of first happened. Some of the things that they asked me, I literally had no idea what they said. And it started out that I would kind of fumble around with trying to come up with an answer, but ultimately, after doing it so many times, I've become comfortable with admitting when I don't know something, but you can't say I don't know to everything, because that's not helpful. So I've now kind of, whenever I get into a situation like that and I do start feeling some nerves, I treat those nerves as kind of information to understand, hey, I don't know something, okay, well, what don't I know? And then what about what they said could I ask about? And then I start asking questions. And then I may not give them an answer or have the best answer, but at least I can start exploring the idea with them. And sometimes it's okay to be a rubber ducky for someone. Just getting out of your head can be helpful for exploring ideas and solving the problems yourselves. So I've solved many problems by never speaking. Other people have done the speaking, and I've just kind of stood there and just shook my head and maybe asked a question or two. Interesting thing about this duck. The prompt for this was like a hot dog and a rubber ducky combined or something. I didn't type that in. I was just going for rubber duck, and then it was a suggested prompt that someone had done before, and I was like, that looks pretty cool. So, yeah, being comfortable with not knowing is a starting place to actually knowing. And as I'm seeking feedback from others, but also contributing feedback, I'm keeping that in mind. This last piece is mostly about what to do when you don't know how to get started with something or you're doing something new. Besides like seeking feedback, asking questions, some of the like obvious things about just getting the scope of something at the beginning. Some things that I found useful are starting out with like imitating something that might have that functionality that you're going for your specific implementation, starting somewhere else in your code base that essentially is similar to what you're trying to build. The only problem with doing that is that all the learning and kind of the hard work to create that initial piece of code was already done by someone else. So you may be more efficient in being able to imitate that specific implementation for your implementation, but you don't necessarily get to learn all the things that went into that along the way. And so that's where breaking things becomes a good complementary behavior to actually imitating. Breaking things and breaking things that you imitate help you at least get a bit more of an appreciation of the limits of whatever you're using and help you to understand it a little bit better. Lastly, dry again has to do with do not repeat yourself. This is do not repeat yourself specifically for mistakes. So in some of the feedback that I've received from my coworkers, I've tried to be conscious of things that I've done before or mistakes that I've made before, maybe specific feedback that I've gotten before, and trying just to, at the bare minimum, do that less or not at all again. Specifically, I have like a document just of notes, and it's just like a daily journal thing. I'll write questions and stuff and keep track of some project stuff, but one of the main reasons for that doc is to collect the feedback that I get from my fellow developers and to have it as a kind of repository for me to reflect and to prevent myself from making those mistakes again. So. And that's all I have. But in summary, for tools, to try to get minimally productive first. So I tried to just get up and running. I didn't want to be the best developer. I just wanted to be a developer. Wheel at your tools and don't let them wheel at you. And it can be very helpful to kind of filter out the noise that can be present. If you have a lot of new things that you're already working on, then for me, it's very helpful to really put some sort of limit to everything, to things outside of those tools, technologies that you need to just be productive first. For feedback, like I said, seeking feedback early and often is my big focus going forward, just so that I am catching things and getting perspectives early on enough so I'm not going down rabbit holes and having to redo a lot of my work. Emotions are information, and those information are usually, for me, around nerves that I don't know something and I should start asking questions. For starting new tasks, recycling things from your code base can be fine, but I really appreciate trying to take the time to understand what I'm using, not just naively copying and pasting it just because it works and it's efficient. And lastly, don't repeat your mistakes. So that's all I got. So thank you all for being here today. I am on some social medias and I do have a website. So if you guys have questions, I'd love
in your tools section, you talk about avoiding fancy tools. So as someone that's new to the industry, the topic, how do you identify, like, how do you know if something's like, or how did you, or is it basically just like stop watching YouTube and Reddit?
That is part of it. So part of it is kind of intentionally kind of ignoring social media stuff. So I did like unfollow tech influencers, and pretty much my accounts don't have really any tech stuff on them. But then for identifying the tools, it was pretty much that first week. Just the specific tools that I need that everyone else at my job is using. Like the common tools specifically. So. Yes.
What was your, how did you actually develop the skills to transfer to get your first step job?
That's a good question. So it all started back when I was a sensory scientist, just
using R.
Yeah. Just getting into just coding and programming, and just getting an appreciation for the value that that can have. And then outside of that, I did personal projects to try to create web applications. So I created a web application called Meal Prep Fun Day. It was solving a specific problem for me. I'm a meal prepper. We do meal prep every week. But we had like this Excel sheet essentially that just had all of our recipes, and I just took that and just started making relational databases and like using SQL and PHP, and I just picked something in regards to technology and just started making it. And then after that, I did an open source program called the Odin Project. And I have not finished it.
How far did you get?
That's a good question. I got to I got to just right before the back end portion, which I think is towards the end.
Right after React.
Yeah, so I was doing stuff with React. And like that Odin project is great because it has you building things along the way, and so it was also like a bunch of projects that I got out of that. But it was also just very thorough in its documentation.
Yeah, I'm a moderator.
Okay.
So
Cool.
I just was curious how you learned. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I promise I'm not playing. Awesome,
Yes.
thank you.
So you mentioned that you realize learning what you don't know is important. I find that sometimes new developers, because of their awareness of their own lack of knowledge, are actually learning at a pace that is far more accelerated than a veteran developer. And so what that means is sometimes within months, they will know stuff that the veteran developer does not know. So what advice would you have for people who've been coding a while when they're working with a newbie who is smarter than them?
I would say I don't have advice for that as individuals. I try not to give advice for things that I am not.
How do you like to be treated would be another way of asking that.
Well, yeah, okay, that's a good way of putting it. So one thing I really like about my team is, so I talked about how they are always asking for feedback, and it's just a very open kind of atmosphere. That was very helpful because it helped just get me comfortable with asking questions myself, because I saw other people asking questions. It's slightly daunting too, because some of the things that they're talking about, it's just like, it's a little bit over my head at times. But for me, at those periods, I make sure to step back and like literally step back from my monitor and pay attention to the conversation. So that's something that I do in response to that. But having an environment where that there's modeling behavior of like what is like good to do and what are good or best practices, that's been very helpful. Yes.
So you just talked about them, like an example of getting feedback. You also mentioned they have to get on board the first few days. Is there anything else they did that was helpful, or something you wished the other developers would have done to help you get started?
No, I don't think so. I think something that I left out here was, so we have several applications. They focused on specifically the one that they were going to have me working on up front. So they kind of did give me some initial configuration for those other ones. But I will say it was just very helpful that it was just very focused, the way that they kind of approached it. And just the fact that like they actually gave me an onboarding kind of situation. So yes.
What's your tech stack at your job?
So we have Laravel on the back end. We use SQL and Angular on the front end. So, yes.
Where do you spend most of your time working
on? Pretty much all of it. Yeah, I started a little bit more on front end, but then pretty much all the things that the projects that I started taking on had a back end and a front end component. I will usually start with the back end just to get endpoints and stuff set up, and to think about just the data structure that I'm working with, and then move to the front end to actually start pinging those backends and sending stuff up. So, yes.
Have you considered, specifically for like the imitate break section you're talking about, did you use like Copilot or anything like that in that process where like you get, hey, this code didn't work, and like break it, understand it, that play a part of the process, and like if not, why not?
So I used it initially, not Copilot specifically, but I think it was SourceGraph's Cody. So, my name. But yeah, I used it a little bit, and it was pretty handy just for like code completion kind of stuff. It was pretty cool that things were really happening and just kind of like reading my mind. But I turned all that off just because I am still learning. And it's kind of copying and pasting, like it's doing all the hard work for me. The understanding is kind of in that algorithm or whatever is going on, that large language model. I guess you could use that to kind of iterate and get to the point more directly, but something going forward is, for me, is trying to understand my APIs and like actually read documentation, not just looking things up. That's kind of where my focus is going and why I don't use those tools. Now, I will say for personal projects, like if I'm trying to learn how to do something specific in Python or something like that, just out of curiosity, I have found some of that kind of to be helpful just to get something up and running. Just, you know, you only got 4 hours outside work. So, yeah.
You thank all of us for being here, but I just wanted to thank you for being vulnerable to share all this stuff. I think it's super fascinating for everyone here. But secondly, one of the big things that you've been talking about a lot is how helpful your team has been. And I know some of the people you work with, and they're great. But let's say hypothetically you were, interviewing tomorrow, or some of these fine folks are interviewing tomorrow. What are some questions that you would interview that team on to try to learn whether or not they would be a team like that, one that has these kind of vulnerable question asking, helpful environments for beginners? How would you find another team like that if you need to?
I mean, I would probably try to be as direct as possible with your questions. If you're looking for an environment that is open, and if you have this kind of understanding of getting that feedback early and often, asking about their processes. So our team is unique in that we don't necessarily have formal code reviews. It's a lot of just informal and more frequent stuff, as opposed to we're having a meeting on Friday. So there's no meetings. It's just kind of show up and ask questions kind of thing. So trying to understand, are there processes involved? What do those processes look like? What are the points of those processes? That might be helpful, but I'm not super sure, to be completely honest. Luke?
Yeah, so are you able to identify a point, so before you made the change when you were working as a scientist, were you able to identify the point, was there a turning point where you decided that software engineering wanted to go down? And as a follow-up, how did you know that was the right decision?
So it's complicated. So there's another talk out there from Tech Lancaster that she and I did about our journey, and that kind of goes into details of that. But I actually, when I went to college, I was initially going for engineering, and I was thinking about computer science. But at the time, boot camps and stuff were becoming a big thing, and people kind of having a software engineering job without the degree was becoming kind of more prevalent and known, at least from my perspective as someone going to college. So I was like, if I'm going to college, I'm going to do something unique that I have to go to college for. So then stumbled upon food science and went with it. But software engineering stuff has kind of always been in the back of my mind. When I was doing food science, I made sure to take some classes in R because of the statistical analyses involved with consumer testing. It wasn't necessarily something that I was planning on coming back to, but it was an option that I left open. I will say there was a point in my job where it's just kind of I can go no further. So it was get out or just keep doing the same old thing. And I wanted to do something different. So that's what I pretty much do. But
that talk, by the way, if anyone wants to see it, is on the techlancaster.com page. We have a new little embedded YouTube feature, so you can see all the YouTube videos from Tech Lancaster talks, and they're all so go find that one. It was a good talk.
Yes. Do you ever find yourself with a strong feeling of ownership over the projects that you create within your teams, and how do you deal with the sharing of ownership over things and kind of passing the torch on to someone? Because I know it's sometimes easy to build a project and then you feel like you're stuck on that project, and whenever an issue comes up with that, you're always the kind of go-to person, but that doesn't really help other people on the team.
yeah, I will say I don't feel that so much so with my current, because we do move pretty fast in changing priorities based on things that are coming from clients. So we've kind of shifted priorities a couple of times, so things are pretty fluid in my current work environment. But when I was making web applications and stuff at my former job, there was a little bit of that. There was specifically a statistician that was focused on kind of creating the R&D web applications, and I started contributing to that pool. Something that I tried to do before I left, just to be kind of just as a polite kind of thing to do, was to try to bring him up to speed of the things that I did do. That would be the closest thing that I've experienced in regards to trying to help other people, because literally I was leaving, essentially, transfer ownership in that way. Yes?
Just wondering how you, so you mentioned your team is really helpful in helping you get up to speed. Whether you do formal PR reviews or meetings, whatever you do, I'm curious what's been helpful for you in code review? Like, do your managers, are they asking you general questions, like how can you make this better? Or are they more do this specific thing and here's mine, curious which of those was helpful for you?
I think, so we, for me and the one developer, for a specific project that we're only working on, we're the only ones working on it, we are starting to try to bring PRs into kind of the workflow, and at the very least have the other person check it and provide a little bit of feedback, if anything. But what's helpful for me as a new person, when I'm receiving some sort of feedback, whatever situation it is, I'm not always told directly what to do, because that's kind of another loss of learning, essentially. If you're just told what to do, then you can just do it. But I find it helpful that people that I work with kind of point me in the right direction, but don't necessarily go any further than that unless I have questions, and I do get stuck at some point. Yeah, keeping it open-ended for some feedback like that, not just prescribing answers and saying this is the way to do it. Unless we have an agreed upon kind of developer standard that we're working with, which that was all presented to me at the beginning. So, before it repeats, did you have a question or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, what role did the tech community at Lancaster play in your job searching?
Yeah. So last year, at the beginning of the year, we started going to the different Tech Lancaster events. So there's a thing called Pub Standards at the time that was going on. That was one of our first ones. Just tried to keep showing up and just showing up to these kind of social networking opportunities, but also just having an interest in the local kind of tech community. Just gave me exposure to the opportunities, but more specifically, I found this opportunity on the Lancaster Technologists Slack. So there's a Slack where a lot of you guys probably are already on it, but there is a jobs and kind of classified section, and someone posted something in there, and I was just applying for anything and everything, but the role kind of was in an industry that I was familiar with, being in agricultural and food, so I kind of just went with it. But getting out and just being able to talk to other people about what I was doing and just the tech stuff in general, kind of made me feel more comfortable before applying to those things, and gave me exposure to that kind of jobs and classified section. So. Yes?
From the perspective of a newbie, just coming off of that full stack pipeline, whether it be through a boot camp or college, I think a lot of us really have paired programming drilled into our heads. How did you find that differed when you were taking it from personal projects to a larger scale project with a company in like the first couple of months?
So let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So like working with others
Yes.
From a full stack perspective, going from kind of working by myself to working with others.
Or with like paired programming,
Yeah.
like in a boot camp or in college versus paired programming with a team.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know much about paired programming or really what you're saying with that.
Oh, okay.
So please define paired programming.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So like when I came out of a boot camp,
Sure.
and we did a lot of paired programming where you'd be working with like one other person or a group on
Okay.
a project or objective to kind of meet that deliverable for
Yeah.
that, and just how that would apply to working on like a software development team. If you ever find yourself coding with another person or like in conjunction with your team, or is
Yeah.
it mostly solo?
So it is, for the most part, it's kind of working solo, but at those feedback points, when we are starting to have kind of conversation about it, we will start, bringing up the dev tools and then actually going to the source and kind of editing things there. Just depends on what specifically we're trying to do and what we're trying to try out. But yeah, I don't have a specific advice with that, but it is something that kind of just comes up naturally. So, yeah.
I think that's all we have time for.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.